Okay, we just got word on this. So, with our waiver wire running back video this morning, we didn't know the exact details on how long Raheem Mostert was going to be out from that knee injury. Well, now we know it's going to be 8 weeks. And of course, we have to understand that when we're going through and we're looking at an injury like this, the timetable that we are initially given is never the actual timetable on what we should expect. We should always expect the worst when it comes to stuff like this, because the team very rarely is going to say, okay, he's going to be out about 6-7 weeks and then he is back in 5. No, it's the exact opposite. 90% of the time, the player is out 6 to 7 weeks. Then maybe he begins to get in some practices around that 7-week mark. Maybe then is out another week or two of actual game action until he's back. So we're looking at it now and saying, okay, well, Raheem Mostert is out the majority of the season because we're already into week 1. So if he's not coming back until about week 10, the fantasy football playoffs don't last that much longer after that until they are up and going. That's only like a 5-week window where you're getting Raheem Mostert back this season and in a spot where you are going to be able to realistically start him. So now we're looking at it and saying, you know what, with Raheem Mostert, I don't think you can rely on him whatsoever. What's going to be nice is you do get him going to the short-term IR, so you're not going to have to be in a spot where you're just going and making a play where you're having to roster him and have that dead roster spot for the rest of the season. So, of course, you're not going and dropping Raheem Mostert when you can just move him to the IR. And the question comes, what should we expect from Trey Sermon? What should we expect from Elijah Mitchell? And this is a question that we have gotten a lot in the premieres and as well as the live streams over the past 24 hours. And it's essentially saying, Mason, why do you keep talking about Trey Sermon? Mason, didn't Kyle Shanahan already say that Elijah Mitchell won the job? He beat out Trey Sermon. Elijah Mitchell is the guy that we want. And I will say, 100% you need to go through. You need to make sure that you're picking up Elijah Mitchell like we have previously discussed in our waiver wire running back video earlier today. But at the end of the day, we're also looking at this as a scenario, and that with Trey Sermon, I think he is the better bet that we are going to have over Elijah Mitchell, because we look at these two running backs. And while, yes, Elijah Mitchell is a very dynamic runner, a very explosive runner, and he was an intriguing prospect coming out. And that's why some people, when he was drafted in the 6th round to the San Francisco 49ers in our deep dynasty leagues this offseason, they were drafting Elijah Mitchell at the very end of rookie drafts. So I don't want to discount what we have from Elijah Mitchell at all. I think he is a very talented runner, but at the same time, I think you're going to see a very clear role that Elijah Mitchell should have on this 49ers offense, and that's going to be the player that is the change of pace back. I do not think they want to go in and just assume that Elijah Mitchell is going to be able to handle 20 plus touches every single week. I think that would be very bold for anybody to look at the frame of an Elijah Mitchell. Like if I pulled this up right now with Elijah Mitchell, you are going to be surprised to see his actual size and the percentile that his BMI is in. So if we pull up Elijah Mitchell, he is 5'10", 201 pounds, which gives him a BMI of 28.8. And if you read our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide, where we go through and we look at what actually matters for these running back prospects coming in, y'all have already read that the minimum threshold that you're going to have for a running back with their BMI to really profile to be a 3-down running back is going to be 30.0. So you're not having Elijah Mitchell hit that threshold, really not even having him come close to hitting that threshold. Whereas Trey Sermon, I'll say there are also things on the Trey Sermon profile that you do not like to see, but we can at least pull up this Trey Sermon profile and go, okay, well, this was a player that they traded up to get, and you're looking at him where they traded up multiple 4th round picks to take him in the 3rd. At the same time, he's 215 pounds compared to what you had with Elijah Mitchell at 202. He was a better college receiving running back, which is significant because one thing is, we don't necessarily have Elijah Mitchell looking impressive in week 1 and what he was doing catching the ball out of the backfield. So I think that is going to limit the upside that we could see from Elijah Mitchell. Trey Sermon, we were drafting him aggressively in our fantasy drafts, which of course it is not exciting at all to go through and to see that he is a healthy scratch for week 1. That's horrendous. But what is exciting in the very least is the running back that we said was going to get injured in Raheem Mostert ended up getting injured. And I don't want to be running victory laps around an injury. I've been on record saying very rarely can you call a player an injury prone guy coming into the season, because 9 times out of 10, when you're doing that, you're actually going to be way too overconfident with your ability to predict something that's mainly random in a small sample like the NFL season with these sporadic random events with these injuries. So I don't want to be acting like, oh, look at me, I'm so smart, we ended up calling someone that was going to get injured. It was more so that you looked at Raheem Mostert as a 29-year-old running back that had one game with over 20 carries. And I know I've said that stat maybe 30,000 times so far this offseason, during draft season, even including this week, because it was a very important stat to illustrate the fact that with Raheem Mostert, he was one of the very few running backs that we could call quote unquote injury prone. So that comes through. And I wanted to say that Trey Sermon was going to be automatically the 3-down guy that was going to take over given the team investment. And we can't be that confident based on what we have seen over the past few days. I think that us going and just completely overlooking Elijah Mitchell as an option that wasn't even intriguing in the back half of those underdog drafts at the very end of our dynasty drafts, that was a mistake on my part. But from here, we do have to reassess with the information that we've had from Kyle Shanahan with the profiles of these two running backs still. And if I had to go through and if I had to make one solid bet on the running back that I would prefer to have in this backfield, that guy is going to end up being Trey Sermon. Trey Sermon looks like he's going to be the better pass catching running back. He looked like he was the better college prospect. Trey Sermon is healthy, at least from what we have heard. Maybe there's something going on behind the scenes like a Brandon Ayuk situation, and the 49ers aren't that friendly in what they're willing to tell us. So yeah, there are a lot of intriguing things here, but I think as of now, it looks like Trey Sermon could be a league-winning running back, because another thing is, if we want to pull up the fantasy football playoff schedule, y'all know we identified this running back room as a room that we wanted to be trying to come away with Trey Sermon because they were going to have a great offensive line, because this was going to be a very well-coached team with Kyle Shanahan. This is going to be a team that has a lot of trips to the red zone, a lot of red zone opportunities and potential touchdowns for this running back room. And during the fantasy football playoffs, I mean, this is a fantastic schedule where we go through, we pull this up, and I know that you're going to have Raheem Mostert back by then. But a big thing is with these rookie running backs, now the door is open. The door is open for them to go and take that job. So if Trey Sermon and or Elijah Mitchell look extremely impressive through the next 8 weeks or so, I think you are going to have it as a scenario where they may not give that job back to Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert may no longer be looking at a spot where he is even going to have a role in the offense. And I know that is pretty aggressive to say, but at the same time, these rookie running backs are dynamic, and I've never been a big fan of Raheem Mostert. Now, if I pull this up so we can go through and look at what they're going to have during the fantasy football playoffs, they have the Atlanta Falcons, which we just saw. I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles trounce them. They have the Tennessee Titans, where it's, oh my God, look at what Arizona just did at Tennessee. And then they have the Houston Texans in the championship week. I know Jacksonville did struggle against Houston in week 1, but I think we can all relatively agree that this Houston team, by the time we get to that point, there will be no incentive for them to go and try to win football games. Instead, they'll be going out and probably just trying to get the highest pick that they can in the NFL draft. So this is going to be a fantastic fantasy playoff schedule. This is an elite offense based on what we saw week 1, based on what we had 2019, whenever they did have their overall offensive line healthy, whenever they had Kittle in the game, whenever they had a starting quarterback. And between Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo, I still stand by the fact that Trey Lance will come in and he will take over as the starting quarterback at least halfway through the season. You're going to have that transition over to Trey Lance. And I think Lance is also going to end up raising the overall ceiling of this offense at the same time. So there are so many positive reasons and why we should assume that this 49ers backfield is an extremely valuable place to be, an extremely valuable place to invest. The red zone opportunities are going to be sky high. And while, yes, it's going to be very hard to predict on a week-to-week basis, I think that right now we're sitting with as few information, as few data points as we're possibly going to see this entire year. So I think the play is to try to pick up both Elijah Mitchell and Trey Sermon. And then over the next 2 weeks, I think we'll have a great idea of what we're actually getting from the San Francisco 49ers backfield, the guy that we'll feel comfortable going out and starting, because you maybe are now getting a running back 1 or a high-end running back too in one of these guys, with Raheem Mostert being out for the next 8 weeks. I think Mostert may not come back to a job whatsoever. Of course, you can't go out there and cut him, considering that he will be placed in the short-term IR, and you're going to be able to move him to the IR without having to waste a roster spot. I'll say really quick, if you're playing in a shallow redraft league and for whatever reason you're playing in a league that doesn't have an IR slot and you're going to have to just keep Raheem Mostert on the bench, I mean, that's a scenario where you just go through and cut him. You can't afford to waste that roster spot whenever we do have more appealing waiver wire options, but that's not going to be that many of y'all. Y'all should have just at least one IR slot where you can put them in. Now, let me go through and check out the live chat. Of course, thank you everybody coming out to the stream. Thank you everybody who's dropped a like on the channel. I was going to record some Patreon podcasts right now, but I figured that this was pretty big news whenever we have the official report that he is going to be out 8 weeks. So I figured to go live. Make sure you drop a like, guys. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. We'll be live streaming tonight at the same time. Jacob says, is Trey Sermon the guy? That's who I would bet on. The Gaming Brother says, who would you trade for Trey Sermon? Honestly, I don't think the price on Trey Sermon is going to be ridiculous at all right now, considering that he was that healthy scratch. Way more people in a bet on Elijah Mitchell compared to Trey Sermon. So I think you could pay a very reasonable price. I mean, someone that went off this past week that I would trade for Trey Sermon right away would be someone like a Melvin Gordon. I think that would be a perfect one-for-one trade, trying to trade away the touches right now for a running back that potentially has more upside in a more appealing offense. So if you could trade like a Melvin Gordon for Trey Sermon right now, that'd make a ton of sense. Yeah, so let's go through and see if we have anything up. Chris asked why we're not wearing the suit. We're not wearing the suit because we were going through and making podcasts until we had this news drop, and I had to get this news out for y'all. So I figured just go through. It was an emergency live stream. And then, okay, Fantasy Football Trainer says, what happened to Brandon Ayuk? He did not play a snap. Thanks for the 0. Good news, I have Sermon on my squad. Okay, man, clearly you weren't paying attention to what actually happened. Brandon Ayuk was out there. He was deployed as a decoy. The reports that we got from San Francisco were incorrect. We're going to have to look at what's happening in practice before we have a great grasp on what Brandon Ayuk's dealing with this upcoming week. And Lex coming out with the donation. We'll end it with this. Let me answer this. And I will say that we are going to be live tonight as well. So make sure you drop that like on this live stream. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell next to the subscribe button. That way you can come out to our next live stream and you're not just watching it as a video later on. And Lex says, Ruggs or Bryan Edwards, need one tonight. Personally, I'm going to be going with Henry Ruggs. That's a guy that I think is going to be a little more volatile. He's going to be that boomer bust wide receiver. I think the ceiling's a little higher, and with the injuries to the secondary for the Baltimore Ravens and with the injuries to the running back position, I think this game's a little more competitive, and I think you could see a higher chance of getting a big play in. But yeah, thank you all for coming out to the live stream. Hope this helped. I just had to get this news out here because we didn't cover it in the waiver wire running back video today. We talked about picking up Elijah Mitchell, but we didn't talk about the exact timetable for Raheem Mostert himself. So I wanted to come out, wanted to clarify for you. Drop that like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the live stream.